just to start off, Kenneth might have mentioned this before, but we are raffling off some Amazon gift cards. Please use this QR code to check in, leave your information, and then there's a little poll about different stuff that you're interested in case we ever want to reach out in the future, or just to get a gauge of what everyone's interests are. So I'll leave this up for a minute or so. Let everyone do this. In the meantime, yeah, I haven't heard that there's a little Mobi blurb that has been read in WebLab a few times. So hopefully everyone has heard a little bit about us. I hadn't heard about Mobi before, essentially, the final, their sponsor lecture last year, where Anna, the CEO, came in and gave a little talk about the company and the different stuff that we do. So I've also heard some people mention that career fair, we give out huge chocolates, which is true. We go to Trader Joe's and we just clear out the entire chocolate section of all the big 1 pound chocolate bars and everything like that. So hopefully we will try to bring some for the final award ceremony for WebLab also. And if you've missed out in the past, you can grab some free stuff at that point. Okay, hopefully everyone scanned this who's needed to. If not, ask a friend or something. So yeah, we are Mobi, officially known as Mobi Systems. And just as a small agenda for today, I'm going to start off talking about a little bit about the company and who we are. And we were supposed to have 1 or 2 other people here presenting with me today, but it's been a very busy month for us, so people are a little all over the place. But I, from the front end team, can give some interesting analysis of what we do, and then I'll try to give an overview of different parts of the company and what other people are working on. But if you want to know more, I can connect you with anyone, and you can maybe meet up and chat with them one-on-one. So this is our public-facing website, takemobi.com, that has some nice marketing material about what we're up to and the different kinds of fields and spaces that we're interested in. But overall, here's a little sampling of different people who work at our company. Mobi was founded by a bunch of MIT people back in 2012. And then it's grown since then as they've expanded what they were interested in and what we've been working on. But to this day, there's still a lot of MIT alumni there. Our office is based just by the Davis Square T station off the Red Line. So it's really convenient for people who, are used to this area, who like Cambridge, and to kind of transition to that. So what do? We are a B2B tech company. So we make software for a few different spaces, but primarily in the realms of travel, logistics, business processes. And we have a lot of backend engineers that work in areas from data science to algorithm development. For example, the space I'm more into the kind of travel side of things. So we have a really advanced API that allows us to process all sorts of information about points of interest, what we call POIs. So this could be restaurants, this could be hotels, experiences like a museum or tours, anything like that. And then we process a user profile of all sorts of input preferences, what this person's interested in, where they want to go, when they want to go. And then we can do a full end-to-end trip itinerary of what their experience might look like. So different sites like Expedia or TripAdvisor, you go to them to essentially, pick one specific thing that you're looking for and book through that. But our system both handles spatial and temporal organization of all these different pieces. So we have a team that builds this, what we call our agent planner. And then on the front end team, we're able to use that and kind of specialize it for the different use cases that we have. We also have teams, for example, here I listed business processes. We have a data science team that works on automating different sorts of documentation processing for companies from insurance fields to basically anything you can think of where there's a lot of documentation and PDFs and forms that get pushed through it. So at the back, Mobi, we have a lot of cool innovative solutions to different problems, and we're really full of many talented engineers who specialize in these different pieces. So this little thing on the right is from the website too, but it's a little example of how we work. How we get connected through different companies and what they're interested in, what they need help with. And then we quickly build out these different proofs of concepts, see what we can do for them, and then continue building out these different bespoke products for people. Okay, So, like I mentioned, I specifically am on the front end development team. So our team, there's about 8 of us, and we all specialize in slightly different stuff, but we're usually working on these different UIs for companies such as Mandarin Oriental, the kind of luxury hotel chain, recently Marriott. Also, in the past, we worked with American Express. We did a project with Disney a while back. And then currently, we're working with a lot of other bigger travel companies, such as Chase, the bank company, who has a very large sum of the travel space due to credit cards and booking with points and everything like that. So, like I mentioned before, we have our different planner APIs, which are really powerful. They're also something we're looking towards, pushing publicly so different companies can consume these APIs and maybe develop their own products with it. But currently speaking, we're pretty much the internal customer in this case. And then myself on the front end team that we often call the SDK, because we're kind of building out bespoke components that can be used to interact with our API to build these different unique solutions. So I think the interesting part of all this is just to kind of show some of the websites we built recently and how these apps function and what we can do with them. So I will go to this first one. Okay, so this is what we are calling our agent planner, or agent for agent, because it's essentially like a AI agent that is collaborative that you work with in order to handle different bookings. Imagine you're a travel agent and you receive calls from all sorts of different customers, and you're trying to build them all good trips for whatever they're interested in. So this was a project that we built for Marriott, and that it's kind of in their R&D process of figuring out different ways that they can improve their own travel coordination systems and what we can do for them. So you start and you can see, like in this case, I'm the travel agent and I can see all my different customers that I interact with here. And then I can pick any of them and then verify their identity. And then once you're in here, it retrieves all sorts of data about past interactions in the past, different notes that I've left to kind of make sure I remember what this person's interested in, along with preferred brands, recent trips, upcoming trips. And so a classic plan of action from here would be, I get a call from Jim, who lets me know that he wants to go on a new trip. So we'll pull open the planner here. And then this is kind of the one-stop shop dashboard to input all their interesting preferences, both things that are what we call fixed. So it's something that this person always wants. And then per trip, which is something that, specifically they're wanting to do on this vacation. So we can start by putting in a location. Does anyone have kind of a dream travel destination or somewhere they'd like to go? What was that? Omaha? Yeah, we could do Omaha. Let's see. I'm sure there's good data because it's in the US, but I don't know if I've ever met someone specifically wanting to take a vacation to Omaha. Okay, so we'll pull this open and then we can pick some dates. Let's say we'll go next month in February for a good week, so we can see all the Omaha sites. And then we'll go ahead and save this. And we'll say Jim's trip to Omaha. Okay. And then once this trip's saved, this gives us, this interacting with our backend to, create the session where we can interact with the data and make sure nothing's lost. And then we can go through and say what type of accommodation we're looking for, the hotel brands, numbers of rooms, guest rating, and all of this will filter this live view on the right, which is giving us all the different hotels that we know about that fit these matches. And so because this is kind of an agent-facing product, we want to give them as much information as we can that we know about it. So for example, this tags list here is a very exhaustive list of things such as computer station to wheelchair accessible to meeting rooms, all the different information that we've gathered from public sources. This we get from places such as OpenStreetMaps or Expedia, TripAdvisor. We both have like partnership plans with them or use available data to create these systems. And then the agent can go through and look what they're wanting, and then they can bookmark certain POIs that they want to add to this trip. And then we can go to dining and we can look for Japanese restaurants and then go through here And let's say we also want to find things with cupcakes or with wine or other Asian and Chinese restaurants on top of that. And then ideally, this would filter down and find good matches for us. We have a lot of Italian stuff in Omaha. So for different reasons, different things will match based on the algorithm that we provide. And a lot of it depends on what's available in these different places. We try to always provide recommendations no matter where you are, but we can also mark this. And then same thing with activities. These will all push different things through. So a lot of interesting data that is more relevant to, the travel agent trying to make something very specific to their different users. But the cool thing is once they're ready, instead of having to manually go through, find all the different opening hours for these places and build out the itinerary from start to finish, along with transportation options, we can instead go here, build itinerary, and this will run it through our entire planner system. At the top, we'll see all the different preferences that might be applied to this person that we weren't able to match just because of the availability of different options and the inputted bookmark places. But at the bottom here, we get a day-by-day itinerary of, for example, the breakfast that they'll be having at the different time of day, the different tags applied to it. And then you can also toggle on the transit and it'll show all the different, it'll take 13 minutes to taxi from one place to another or to walk, to take public transit, all these different options that gives them a really good starting base to know exactly what is going on with their trip. And then they can also quickly see these are all the different dining options that have been filtered by day, and these are the different activities. So it's really a powerful system. On the back end side, we're constantly trying to figure out what makes a good trip and how do we know that what we're creating is something that people want. But it's an interesting problem. And, we've been iterating on this and showing it to people and user testing it for a while now. So it's able to come up with some unique things, and in other areas, we're still working on it too. But this is, the agent for agent product, which is really cool. And then if we go to the trips tab, you can see a little sampling of the other trips that we've been on so far, along with this tab where we can see their own fixed preferences through time. So this was the first thing that I worked on when I got to Mobi. And it was a good kind of intro into working with our team and figuring out our product pipelines. Everything should start ideally with some sort of user stories where you're figuring out what does this product need to do? What are all the different use cases that we need to handle? And then we, go through our design team, create mockups, iterate, and then eventually move into actual engineering. At Mobi, we have fairly small teams relatively, and we like to build things fast and figure out what's working, what's not. So we like to work a lot in parallel, which is fun and something that I enjoy. And then we were able to make this. We made this in about 6 weeks, roughly, from start to finish, and then to final presentation. And then since then, we've been in chats about, what are the next steps we need to take from there, and how to make it even better. But I find it really cool. Also, as I'm showing this, I would love for, at the end when we have time, if there's any specific piece or functionality that you're interested in, I'll leave these tabs open and you can ask questions about it too. The next product I find really cool is more of the consumer-facing traveler planner. So this one was specifically for travel agents, but we've also built other products for if, any one of us was to go online and want to plan out a trip for a place. So here it is, just in a mobile responsive view. And so this app we built in conjunction with the Singapore Tourism Board as kind of one of their pushes to, help attract people to visit Singapore and to be able to explore different stuff that they might want to do while they're there. So as you open this on your phone and you're immediately met with a bunch of different popular POIs that you might want to go to. If you know about Singapore, or if you've seen the movie Crazy Rich Asians, you probably know what Gardens by the Bay is. Very, very, very popular location with lots of cool architecture and things to do there. And so this app provides a quick way for you to kind of glance through these different popular POIs. And then, if you're wanting to go to these big ones, you can mark these as kind of your bookmark items of what you'd like to participate in. The airport, Universal Studios. And then as you add these, you'll get this prompt at the bottom to build the itinerary with AI. So it'll take you to kind of a new trip form where it's going to now ask you, okay, we know you want to go to these different places, but when do you want to go? Who's coming on this trip? And what other stuff might you be interested in? And so we can just select architecture, nature, and culinary things. And now you might notice that, between these two products, the other one presented like about 1,000 different preferences and tags that a person might be interested in. Whereas this one, we're just kind of sampling this down to 12 concise ones that might be more approachable for someone kind of feeling out a trip like this. So this is where it becomes really interesting to talk about what are these different products for, and how do we adjust our own internal API understanding to present something more usable to the different people who might be interacting with it. So we can go through here, and then we see that we have, those 4 places already on our wish list, which you can swipe to remove them, or from here, you'll get additional recommendations, also now taking into account these different small tags that you've applied. And then you can continue to bookmark things, or you can search. Let's say we're looking for how. So you can click on any of these places, art them, or just enter a larger grid search from here and keep adding more things. And then once you're ready, this is a similar workflow where, once you've got all the places collected with your preferences, you can generate your itinerary. And then once this is through, you get a more concise timeline view of all the different things that will be going on. So, and then, for example, in this one, in the previous app that you saw, we kind of, even if we only select 3 places, we'll fill in as much space as we can with additional activities and experiences and recommendations. Whereas one of the inputs from the Singapore team when we were working on this is that they wanted to make it a very controlled experience where we only lay out all the different things that the person is looking for. And then if they want to, they can go back to their wish list, explore, and then add more things to it. So as you go through this trip here, you'll see on the first day, all we have planned is a lunch, and then you can see their hotel stay at night. And then the next day we have Universal Studios from 11 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then additional time before going back. So it's a kind of a more minimal itinerary that might be easier for a person to interact with and then modify as they would see fit past that. But it's a really cool tool to quickly look at it. And then there's also a map view here where you can see the different pins by day, and then see this one's Universal Studios Singapore, this one's the Marina Bay Sands, and then go from there. So this is our Singapore demo that we made. There is a version of this live embedded within the Singapore tourism website, but we also have it on our own staging link for internal testing and usage and from there. So I think this one's really cool. This one I worked on, it was just me and the designer. So it was a really fun way to iterate and build out some of our own systems on top of it. And then the final one I want to show is similar to the previous one, but instead of giving a user the option to build their own trip, it's really just to display a trip that's been built for them. So one could see this as, we have that first product with the travel agent who's going through and building out this really unique trip, adding extra information to it and whatnot. And then once they're ready, they submit this trip, and then the traveler might have this app and then be able to view this very detailed trip that they've seen. It's not necessarily to edit it and to add more to it, but to use it and to understand it from there. So this one we built out for an example trip going through Costa Rica. This we built this is one of our more recent demos that we've done for Chase and for the travel company Frosh that they acquired recently. So as you go through here, you'll get, a quick overview of where we're going in San Jose, Costa Rica, quick highlights of it, and then very personalized snippets of, a message from your travel agent, displayed information on top of it. We utilize a lot of maps in what we do because we're relying on the spatial information and people want to know where they are and how they're getting there. And we also have a high level information. For example, this trip has 3 big city stops throughout Costa Rica in San Jose, Fortuna, and Nantipa. And so each of these get their own unique highlights where you can see this is where you're going to be staying, luxuriant and beautiful paradise, a few quick amenities and features and highlights on top of that. And then this goes through, and then you can go to your day-by-day itinerary, which in a sense is similar to what we just saw. But we have iterated, of course, as we work on each of these projects, we find certain things work better and certain things don't. And so this is supposed to be what we like to call like our luxury itinerary, where, we're trying to make as many small features as intelligible as possible. For example, utilizing this little boarding pass imagery to show a flight. And then you can dive into that and see the actual segments of each of your flights and where you're going. And then one of my favorite parts, which is this little map here that has a little gradient animation showing each of these flight segments. And building out all this stuff, everything's dynamic. So depending on what the different input information is, using the latitudes, longitudes, the flight information that we have, we're able to, build out these different map components for different itineraries. Because this project was for Chase also, we included this little segment about the Chase Sapphire Lounge in the Boston airport, which is cool. If you're into credit cards, you can get a Chase Sapphire card, and Boston has the only lounge in the entire United States currently. So just a fun tidbit. But as you go through this entire itinerary, you can see really detailed information about each of these restaurants, what you might be interested in. And there's all sorts of unique components in here. If you're interested in design and front-end development, which I assume many of you are, we're building out these different modal and bottom sheet components that are responsive, work on different screen sizes. They're also accessible, so you can use key bindings, and if you were to use a screen reader, you could ideally interact with this fairly well too. And then all sorts of different information about the locations. We also, because we have our own internal API, we're able to do fun stuff like pull nearby locations to what you're currently looking at, and then filter those by your own preferences. So we like to include these little carousels at the bottom. So this goes through day by day. We also have a similar map view where you can see the different pins themselves, implementing fun things like clustering if two things are too close together. So to make it look better, it'll only reveal once you get closer. And then other stuff in this app, it's going to include, you can think of what else you might need on a trip. You might want to see your actual booking PDFs and tickets on top of that. And then more generic information about where you're going, what you might need to be aware of in the meantime. I like this component here, this language cheat sheet, which is a cute little quick guide if you're needing help with that. This one in Spanish, of course, for Costa Rica. And then we also display all sorts of contact information on top of that. Okay, so there's a pretty detailed overview of three of the main projects we worked on over the last 6 months or so. In between this, we've also improved other products that we have, but these are the ones that I find most fun to look at and to play with. And I feel like we've made some really good progress on top of that. So yeah, at the end, if you have any questions on any of these, or if you want to build something like it yourself, feel free to chat with me. Okay, so that was going to be my main presentation for today. And then someone else was going to talk more about our backend team and all the different tech stack we use for that. But because I'm the only one presenting today, I figured I would talk a little bit about my own experience at MIT and Web Lab and how I got to Mobi. As maybe some of you have seen or heard about, yeah, I was in Web Lab last year in 2023 and had a lot of fun with it. And Mobi was sponsoring the competition last year also. And then afterwards, they reached out to me and they really liked the project and they were looking for someone to, help build out these demos that I've just been showing. And so we got connected and then I started working there, which was really fun. And so a little bit more about me. So I wanted to do course 4, which is architecture, because I was really into graphics and 3D modeling and different art projects. But once you get to MIT, of course, you realize you don't really know what you're doing or what you want to do. And I wanted to get more into some of the engineering and the technical side of things. So I tried out course 1, civil engineering, for those of you who might not know. And then, as I got into it, course 1 has its own like mini coding class. And then one of my friends convinced me to take 6001 or 600, whatever it's called nowadays. And I realized you could code and you could also make cool things like art with programming. And so I was just talking with Joyce about this earlier, but my sophomore spring in 2020, I actually did web lab also with some friends of mine, and it was like my first experience ever building a website, and I had a lot of fun with it. And then, so from there, I would work on side projects, and I ended up switching to Core 6. I got really into kind of working on design, front-end apps, and also things in the realm of computer graphics. So for animation, for video games, and that was kind of my big passion. So my junior summer, between junior year, senior year summer, I got to work at Pixar, the animation studio, which was just a really, really cool experience and deep dive into, how does computer graphics and 3D work out in the real world, and how engineering skills can be merged with art in different ways. So then from there, came back to finish my senior year, and I took web lab again because I had, I really like making things, and I think having a month to just like build a project is the coolest thing ever, which is why I love this class so much. And then I built this app here, Commons. So I think you can find this on the web lab page, but I figured I would show it off real quick in case you haven't seen it, and just talk about what I like about it. Mainly just because I also like to see other people's projects and see what inspired them, and what other things you can do with it. So if any of this is interesting to you too, I'd love to talk with you about it. But the goal of this project is to make a little 3D editor where you can collaboratively block out different scenes, whether you're into animation or even like filmmaking or theater. You often build, in theater especially, they'll often build out little scale models of sets, so you can like really get a sense of what the physical space is, and sit around a table with people and be like, okay, where should this go and where should the lights be? So this is supposed to be the digital version of that. You could think it's almost like Figma, but in 3D, that sort of thing. So here's a little GIF here of building out a scene with a bunch of friends of mine who I got on at the same time. And we had the prompt of like, what if we built a little like Mario Kart track? So all of us just going, and you can see the different people editing in the background and building out these different shapes with just basic primitives, and yeah, just having fun with it. Okay, and then I'll show real quick, just dive into the scene. And so for some background building this, we'll go to templates, and then we'll grab, we'll grab the city scene. Okay. So for some background, I was really into 3D, but in the world of computer graphics, most things are done in C++, or if you're working in a game engine, you might use whatever that engine's attached to. Unity is super popular. You usually script in C#. But doing 3D for the web, there is a lot out there, even though it might be a little chaotic in some senses of figuring out how to do things or what's like the best source of truth. But there is a wonderful library called 3JS, which controls most of like this is how you get from JavaScript to rendering a 3D object. And then there's another library called React 3 Fiber, which essentially, builds a React renderer that will move your components into 3JS and build a really declarative way of making 3D scenes like this. So I was experimenting with it, and I was like, oh, maybe I could build something cooler, and which is how I got into this. And so very simply, you can grab all these different objects and place them. You can scale things up and down. You can grab any of these objects here, and then that'll just snap them into the scene at different points. Ideally, you'd use a mouse, but this is trackpad compatible just because it's a website and most people might be on laptops. And then anything you place, you can zoom into with pressing F just to kind of recenter really quick. And then you can hold down Shift and quickly add more objects to the scene. It's been a long time since I demoed this, so I don't remember all the things you can do in this. But the goal is just very low barrier to entry. I have an idea of how I want to lay something out or where I want to start, but I want to I want to be collaborative with it. I want to share it with other people. This is a great place to start. There's also some features for dropping comments into the scene. This is a box. And then leaving that for other people to reply to or to resolve if you're actually doing some sort of iteration on top of it. And then one of the things I love the most about this is this camera saving feature here at the bottom. So let's say, I find the composition I'm really looking for. If I am doing some sort of video or film and I want to get specific camera angles, I could try in this app to find what I'm looking for and then add a camera here at the bottom. And then as I move away, you'll see there's been a new little camera icon placed here in the world. And then if I click back on this icon, it'll snap me back into that view. And so this is helpful if, you're doing like fake location scouting and you built out this little set and then you say, okay, this is a really cool camera angle, save a snapshot of that. This is another really cool one. And then you can just share this link with someone else, go through it and just share so easily with it, which in the space of big art software, even if you use Photoshop or Blender or anything like that, sharing files can be kind of a nightmare because they're so complicated. There's so much you can do with them. So goal of this project was just to like simplify, scale it down, and see how useful this could be, which I think for building a project over the course of a few weeks is really a great mindset to have. Just find one or two niches within a space and try to see what you can do with it. Okay. So there's that project. And let's see, 137. Okay. So I'll try to leave a few minutes at the end if anyone has questions. And this is my last main slide to show for today. Yeah, so like I mentioned, I personally love seeing what's out there and what people have built as a way to inspire myself and to also, not have to reinvent the wheel. And with any sort of programming, sometimes writing something from scratch can be a useful exercise. Sometimes you need to if you want it to work a certain way, but also leaning on different open source libraries or features that are out there can really help you make your ideas become reality a lot quicker. And so these are a few of my favorite projects. So like I mentioned on the left, we have Three.js and React 3 Fiber. And so I left some links on here. I'll try and get this slideshow shared afterwards, so anyone who wants to can go through it. But Three.js has an awesome demo portfolio of just like 1,000 sites that have been built using it in one way or another. These range from games to data visualization to people's own portfolios to whatever you name it. And using some sort of graphics library, it is complicated. And maybe for WebLab, you want to use something like this. But if it's something you're interested in, I think it's a great space to try it out and know that there's lots of cool documentation and examples out there to start off on top of that. And then like I mentioned, React 3 Fiber essentially compresses this all down into React components. So it works really well with the WebLab ecosystem of React and going from there. And they use hooks, function components, all sorts of cool stuff. And then the second bullet up here is something I've been using a lot for work, which is Mapbox. So in the different web demos that I was showing, we have a lot of maps with pins and paths and viewing things all over the place. So we use Mapbox, but we have our own API key. I do think there's a free version that you can use that's pretty cool. And you can do all sorts of interesting things. They have full 3D controls, but you can also just use it to integrate different spatial data into your app, which is really cool. And then, or if you're interested in the open source route, there's a version called Map Libre, which was kind of forked off of Mapbox back in the day when Mapbox went from open source to a licensing model. And so this provides a really other cool way to see behind the scenes on how to do a lot of the stuff. So would definitely encourage that. And once again, if you have questions, happy to chat. The other thing that I've used a lot since working at Mobi is UI libraries, because we're building demos and we kind of have a good design of what we want, but we're trying to build it fast and not worry too much about a lot of the extraneous small features. Using UI library can be very useful in our case. And so there's a lot of popular ones. Traditionally there were things like Material UI, and there's also like Radix, which gives you base components that you can style on top of it. In the past few years, there's been some more modern ones that came out. This past year, there's one called ChadCN UI, which is one that you kind of copy and paste the code into your own app, which is really cool. And they have like a whole CLI for merging that in. But there's one called Mantine or Mantine, depending on how you want to pronounce it. That is a more fully featured React components library that I think is super useful for projects of all different types. One thing I love about it is their input components. So if you're building a project where you're trying to get user input through forms or through clicking, there are so many different edge cases and accessibility things you should be thinking about. And it is great to learn how to do this from scratch. But if you're limited on time and want something that works out of the box, using something like Mantine or like Shadcn can be a great time saver, especially for things like, we have out of the box modal components, popovers, drawers, things like that. Mantine is MIT open source license, which is really cool. So you can also dive into their source code and see how they do things. So a little bit of, using someone else's already built system to not have to worry about it, but also as you dive more into it, if you ever want to build your own UI library for your own project, it's great to know how other people have solved these sorts of problems in the past. So at Mobi, we have our own internal component library that we're building, but then we often, we'll rely on these external ones as a way to bridge the gap between what we're missing and what we currently have. And then, with every project, we realize it would be great to build out these other unique components, and we start integrating that through our own design system. But also, like, there is, you should definitely try your best if you're going to use this maybe for WebLab project, think about how you can restyle it to make it your own and integrate it better into your own app. But there are great ways of restyling it. And for example, this entire app here was built using Mantine components, which if you look close enough, you'll see it. But at a high level view, we defined our own design system around it between colors and shapes and fonts. And you can really kind of make it your own without too much effort on top of it. So big proponent of that, if that's something that you're interested in, if it's something that you're struggling with and need some extra help. And then the last one I put up here is called React Flow. And this is just a very beautiful, wonderful library to do all sorts of node-based editors. So a side project I'm working on is like a node-based board game creator where you can define like rules and turns for each game and then kind of simulate it on top of that. And so I've been using this library and I think it's really cool. And it has a free version. There is also a pro version, but you can do a lot with it. And I love it because this is something that it's really complicated to do if you want to write it from scratch, but it's not too hard to understand and make your own by using the library, which I think is really cool. So I just left these potential ideas, if there's some project that you have or some idea that you're working on, and one of these sparks some imagination of what else it might be able to do. I also think all the libraries I've shown will provide you, if you make it your own, will provide you with something that is like eye-catching, is interesting, more than just your standard project might be. So yeah, those. And then of course, there are so many other libraries and projects that exist out there. The web ecosystem is super huge. So always be looking out for what other people are working on. If it's open source, look through the code, see what's up with that, and see how you can integrate that into your own projects. Okay, thanks so much for listening, everyone. And yeah. Okay, I think we have a few minutes left. So I'd love to take any questions about anything we've talked about today or something that sparked your interest. Yes. That's a good question. So the question is, from the first time I took WebLab to the second time I took it, did I do any other web dev experiences? And the answer is a little bit. I did one or two side projects, mainly just like personal portfolio websites, but not a whole lot in reality. I did the only like the work internships I did one for a game studio where I was writing C++, and then I did my Pixar internship. But some of the best knowledge I gained from my non-web dev experiences was just like how to build useful apps or like what types of things are useful out there. What I like about web dev is it's inherently accessible. Like it's a website, you can link to someone, you can pull it up. It's made to be text input, button input, and quick. So whenever I had like a problem that I was thinking about in one of my other jobs or experiences, I often thought about the first time I took WebLab and how it's like, oh, that would have been great to know about that there's this problem out there before, and I could have like tried to make something to solve it. So by the time I took it again, it was really just like, I think most of what helped me was just having an idea of what I wanted to do. And then I tried to find as many tools and resources out there, like using a UI library that helped me get a lot further. Because I feel like now, I mean, it's only been I've been working at Mobi for like 6, 7 months, but obviously doing anything full time, you get really deep into it very quickly. So I feel like I could have made my project again without a UI library and like been able to make all the components by myself. But at the time, I really couldn't. Like even just sliders and nice drop downs was just kind of out of my comfort zone at the time. So does that answer your question? Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
What do you learn from like web lab? Like how transferable is there? Like how much does it be like your own like knowledge?
Okay. So the question is, from what I learned in web lab, how much is transferable to my own job currently? And in this case, it's very transferable. At Mobi, we use React for basically everything. There's no strict guideline that we have to, but it's easier at a company if everyone's just kind of doing the same thing. So out of the box, that was super helpful because at least we're all using React. There are a few technologies that I wasn't familiar with beforehand. For example, Next.js, which we use for most of our projects. I did see that there is a lecture on Next.js at some time this week. So that is a really cool, unique technology and something that I was new to. But the reality is at any job, you're going to be learning so many new things, whether it's how to do the coding work or like how the systems are set up, or even just like the cultural practices of how coding is done or how reviews might be done. So it's definitely, I feel like Web Lab is really great at giving useful skills, both teaching relevant technologies, but then on top of that, just giving you a space to figure out how to work, especially if you're working with a team. You know, that is a super useful skill. That's a good question. I wish I knew exactly the details of this. It's kind of slightly outside my sphere, but I could definitely talk with our backend team and see if we could provide some keys for it. The main problem is our public documentation isn't super great, so it might be more of a headache to try to work with than not. But if you're interested in just like seeing more about how it works, then I should provide an email and you should reach out and connect that way. Do you have some way of emailing out after this with extra information? Okay, I will provide an email after this. So if you're interested in looking more at the API or knowing more about it, potentially getting a public key, like some sort of limited use key, you can reach out that way. Any other questions? Yeah. Okay. So the question is, do I have any other plans to work on the web lab project that I made? And then what other goals I might have for it? At the time, I had some thoughts of what I would like to do with it. And I have worked on it a little bit. I will say, outside of school, work has become more of like the main coding that I do. And then like in the evenings, I will still project definitely. But like any project, often when you're done with it, you kind of want to restart from scratch and do something completely different. So I've since moved on and tried to work on other projects, but a lot of them still using the same stuff. I really like working with React 3 Fiber, the library. It's just a fun new space. It has a great Discord community, lots of cool projects coming out with it. So I try to use a lot of the same things that I learned from it, but maybe at some point I'll go back to it. I think I also focused it more on, I think if you're building a project for Web Lab that you want to continue on forever, you should really think about that in what the product does. For example, in mine, it could be useful in certain use cases, but I thought it was more of a cool proof of concept for a small lightweight app that might be handy once in a while, but not necessarily fit for scaling up to be something that's actually used in a big development pipeline on top of that. So yeah, maybe one day though, maybe one day. Or if one of you has a cool related idea, I have no copyright, so. Yeah. Yes, that's a great question. So the question generally is, what is the actual structure of Mobi? Are we like a consultancy, or how do projects work in general? And so we really provide, like we're providing software products. We're less helping people with their own stuff and more offering like, this is what we know how to do, and this is what we're capable of. And then here's how we might be able to help you. But because we are B2B and we're not just providing a single white label solution, we are often working on almost a more consultant basis where it's more back and forth on how we're doing it. As far as teams go, most of the teams at Mobi are somewhere between 5 to 10 people working on any given project. There's some inter-team work also, like on the travel apps that I showed today. That's really the efforts of the planner backend team and then the front end development team that I'm on. So that can theoretically be like 20 people working on it at a time. A little more background information about Mobi. There's about 75 employees in total, and we've grown a lot in the past 2 years. I think 2 years ago, there was about 30 employees. So we're really, we're finding our niche within these different industries and finding what one of these products will be the most useful. I could see us at some point focusing more in on 1 or 2 of these products, depending on how they fit the market at different times. Okay. Yes, definitely. Yeah. I think, if you were interested in working for Mobi, the pros in that sense are we do a lot of cool, because we're working in travel spaces, infrastructure spaces, a lot of geospatial stuff. We often do a lot of visual things. So for example, we have our head of data visualization. She was a course 4 master's student here at MIT, is amazingly talented when it comes to using all the different data viz libraries and things like that. And so she uses both her innate architecture skills, but also applies them really well for the different products that we're building. So that's really cool. Yes. Yes. That's a good question. The question is, how many MIT alumni work at Mobi out of the 75? I don't know exactly, but I would say somewhere between a third to a half, something like that. There's a lot, but there are also non-MIT alumni. Yes. We currently don't have any internship openings, but we're happy to take resumes. We are, figuring out, we are constantly in flux, constantly growing and changing. So I will also prepare a place for people to, leave your resume or leave your information with whether you're looking for internships or full-time opportunities in that sense. But yes. Yes. I think other than MIT, we have a lot of people from Carnegie Mellon, some Stanford people, some Harvard people. Also depends on what space they're from. Our designers, actually one of our designers was an MIT course 4 alum. So I guess it kind of reaches all the different spaces. But we also have our 3 main founders, from MIT PhDs have been doing this full time, but we have other people that have joined us from other companies. Our VP of engineering was previously the head of travel engineering for Google, which is really cool. So he has a lot of great information on all the different Google systems in travel, like Google Flights. Okay. Just a few more minutes left. If anyone has any other questions. Yes. Yeah, go for it. Yes. So how are we using AI at Mobi? So we inherently, our planner, for example, it is an AI. It doesn't use any LLMs in its own system, but it is a complex, weighting and matching and tagging system. But on top of that, we do, we're using natural language processing and LLMs in how we build out our database of information. So the way we are processing data from OpenStreetMaps and from the different data sources, we often use it for tagging things or scoring. For example, when you're taking images from all these different sources and putting them together, if you're getting it from TripAdvisor, it might be some random user uploaded selfie. Whereas if it's from Expedia, it might be a really nice cover photo branding of a hotel. So we are using AI to attempt to clean up our data in a sense, and then also augment it where we can on top of that. So we do have a number of people who, specialize in AI and ML stuff and are working on those teams. But yeah, on the back end side of things. So I'm a little removed from it. Okay. Any last questions? Okay. Thanks everyone for listening, and I will make sure we get follow-up information now. But yeah, that's it.